the moment. So, Tom, would you like to step in and give us some insight?
Sure. I think it's pretty close to what I think may happen. What I might add, though, is that maybe people aren't aware of for the adoption and why it's so important, is that in April, FMCSA and CVSA published the out of service criteria. So if there's not an AOBRD or an ELD in the vehicle after December 18th when it's required, that would be a 10-hour out of service until it's rectified.
Thank you. We'll move on to Kelly now. Kelly, do you want to give us a couple of comments on these results?
Yeah, I think I agree with Tom. Certainly there's a lot of folks that just are not realizing the gravity of not having that ELD in there or being grandfathered with an AOBRD. They literally will be put out of service. There's a lot of also, I think Clem referred to the fact that some people are still trying to figure out, do they need to have an ELD? A great example came up to me this week that I hadn't heard, and I've been around this field for a long time, just as Tom and Clem have. This one was a utility customer that generally utilities get a utilities exemption, but they were pulled over and ultimately had an audit about their construction side of the business. So where they were constructing new utility facilities, that portion and all of the workers and trucks associated to the construction side of their business did have to have ELDs, and they weren't able to take the construction exemption on that side. So there's always surprises with the ELD, what's compliant, what's not compliant. So I think what's also reflected in these numbers is there are quite a few people that have AOBRDs, or they believe they have AOBRDs, and this is important too. There's a lot of folks out there that have a telematics device and they automatically think that means they have an AOBRD, and that's not necessarily the case either. They have to be AOBRD compliant if they want to have the grandfather clause. So it's not as easy as just, hey, I got a telematics device, therefore I've got an AOBRD, I'm good until 2019. No, that AOBRD or that telematics device still has to be compliant to be considered an AOBRD device.
This is Clem Driscoll. I'm sorry, the call dropped. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Clem. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you had asked me to comment on this. Based on the data that we're getting from the survey, I would say that more than 75% of trucking fleets intend to be compliant before December 18th. Whether that'll happen or not is a question, because the demand, as I showed in my presentation, is going to really peak in the fourth quarter. So it isn't just a question of what the fleet operators want. I think it's a question of what the industry can provide and whether they can provide enough supply on time to enable compliance. Also, I have to admit, as a consultant and a researcher and all, that sometimes people say they're going to do things, but things drag on. So I would say, based on responses, D would be my answer, but with a caveat of it depends whether the industry can support it and whether fleet operators get busy with other priorities and delay. So.
Thank you very much, Clem. So we're going to move on to our second poll, which will now be active for you guys in 1 second. The question is, what is the biggest hurdle suppliers face as the ELD mandate approaches? Again, you have a choice of 4 answers, and then we will get our panelists to review. And we will close in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we have the results for our second poll now on the screen. Kelly, would you like to take us through this time?
Yeah, sure. You know, one thing we're seeing for sure is there's a bunch of new entrants that have jumped into the ELD breach to offer what they're calling ELD compliant solutions, and you know, rushing to certify on the FMCSA site for certified vendors, and that's causing a lot of uncertainty in the market. You know, I'm a capitalist and I love everybody's opportunity to make money and take advantage of things like regulations, but there's a lot of uncertainty about what is truly an ELD certified device. Some people interpret being on the ELD certified website meaning that to be that the FMCSA has blessed these ELD solutions, and that's just not the case. The FMCSA is not blessing any solution. What they've done is they've published technical requirements and rules, and they've said to vendors such as Verizon Telematics, hey, use these technical specifications to validate your ELD solution so that customers can be assured that you've met those specifications. So we take that very seriously, as do, you know, I'm sure Omnitracs and my other Tier 1 competitors. But there's a bunch of suppliers on there that have rushed to say that they're ELD compliant, and I really question that. And so I hope that some of the folks that are on the line here today listening are asking a lot of questions of their ELD provider to make sure that they are not only compliant today, but will be compliant going forward. And I challenge you not to just look at the ELD certification website as validation that a solution is meeting the regulations, because ultimately the criteria to determine if an ELD is compliant rests on the carrier themselves. They have to do their own homework to make sure that the solution is compliant. It's important to pick the right supplier. That's the biggest issue I see.
Great, thank you very much, Kelly. Clem, do you want to go second on this one, on the results?
Sure. You know, supply chain of hardware to accommodate demand is certainly an issue, and I alluded to that earlier, that will suppliers be able to meet the demand, especially going through the third quarter and going into the fourth quarter. So that is an issue. I totally agree with Kelly that there are a lot of self-certified suppliers that I don't think whether they meet the criteria or not has really been challenged yet. And I think there will be some of that. Some of them probably don't. You know, new competition from players offering ELD devices. I can tell you that the bigger players, you know, a couple of which are represented here on this panel, I don't think they're too worried about, maybe wrong, I mean, correct me, about competition from small players. They may lose some business to them, but there's an awful lot of business to be had. And the difficulty there, I think what they're probably struggling with is to meet the demands of their current customers for ELDs, ALBRDs. So I'm saying all three, but I guess I would agree with the audience that A is probably the biggest issue.
Great, thank you, Clem. And then Tom, do you want to round off on the second poll question for us?
Sure. Yeah, I agree quite a bit with what Kelly's comments were on making sure you're looking at the proper device. I think if we look at the supply chain on hardware demand, it's not just the hardware demand, but I agree with that percentage. I think it's going to be just as much resources to assist carriers understanding what they're getting, because you know, and again, you know, there's enough market out there for everybody, as Clem said, but you have to be very careful with how people view these and what really is compliant. I'm So on B, that there's only concern about 19%. I think that should be higher.
Hey, thank you very much, Tom. Again, we're going to launch our final poll question for the session. Looking at the time right now, it looks unlikely that we will be able to have any questions from the audience answered, but I can see that a few of you have asked if the recording will be sent out, and the answer is yes, and that will include a video feed of the screen, so you will be able to receive and review all of the presentation slides of today. So now we're going to launch our third poll. And the question is, what value-added services can we bundle with ELD to offer fleets greater return on investment? Okay, just while the last people finish voting, I just want to remind you that the webinar has been produced as a precursor to the Connected Fleets USA 2017 Conference and Exhibition. You can hear from CJ Driscoll, Omnitracs and Verizon Telematics at this event, where we will continue to discuss the ELD mandate with the rest of the ecosystem present at the event. The event includes over 50 fleet operators in attendance, as we co-locate with the North American Commercial Vehicle Show in Atlanta on September the 25th and 26th. There will be over 300 people on site, and speakers will include Volvo, Daimler, Continental, Zonar, National Association of Fleet Administrators, just to name a few. But we've now got the poll results on screen. So Clem, would you like to take us through them first?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. The answer I would give to this is real-time monitoring. Our research shows, just with few exceptions, well, it shows that the majority of fleet operators, when you ask them what telematics capabilities are most important to you, real-time monitoring always comes out ahead, almost always. The only thing, the next would be driver behavior monitoring. Those are the two real hot buttons. So, and there are a lot of fleets out there that we've interviewed over the last couple of months that some of them already have real-time monitoring, and some have driver behavior monitoring, but they see all these things playing together. Diagnostics is important, but I wouldn't put it as high as the others. So, yeah, I would put D first, A second. Insurance telematics, insurance rates are important. The ability and the hope of fleet operators is that implementing these solutions will lower their insurance rates. So they're all important, but I would put real-time monitoring definitely first.
Thanks, Clem. So Clem says real-time monitoring first. Tom, do you want to give us some insights on these results?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's difficult. There's certain fleets and profiles, and depends on who you talk to, but I would tend to agree with Clem on the real-time monitoring and driver behavior. I think in most cases I take the insurance telematics because that's ancillary to the device and how you implement it. And if you look at what FMCSA is doing with beyond compliance, I think that later in our period here of 3 to maybe 3 years, then you might see some insurance entering into it more than it is now. But I would really go, and depending on who you talk to, the remote diagnostics, as you well know, many of the OEMs are very active in that, for warranty claims and prevent, service failures. So, telematics or remote monitoring first, driver behavior, because, you're looking at your CSA scores. But I'd lower maybe insurance telematics to give more weight to the others.
Great, thanks, Tom. And finally, Kelly, would you close off the poll questions for us with your insights?
Sure. I think what's interesting here is that it's pretty much divided amongst the four, and I think what that reflects is that every operation is different. Every operation needs, kind of things that will deliver the return that they're looking for. So what that suggests is having an ELD device that's part of a platform that gives you lots of different options and opportunities to address all of these needs. There's one that I was a bit surprised wasn't on here that I think is low-hanging fruit. As we see the ELD adoption curve happen, and we know that the large majority of out-of-service violations in North America last year were form and manner issues, so not filling out the log appropriately, not having the right documentation, etc., doing the math wrong. Those are all going to go away. So the roadside inspectors and the weigh scales are going to be looking for the vehicle fitness a lot more. So that means that the inspection of the vehicle before the driver goes out on the road is going to be more critical. So one of the low-hanging fruits that fleets should be looking for from their ELD provider is an electronic DVIR, driver vehicle inspection report, to make sure that the drivers are doing that. And we've done something with our DVIR that's quite innovative. Is we actually provide a confidence score to the fleet that the driver in fact walked around the entire truck. So we actually use the mobile device accelerometer to count the steps and the time to do that DVIR walk around to make sure they are doing a proper vehicle inspection, because as I said, the inspection violations this year are going to be a lot more related to vehicle inspection. And we know that the DOT and the troopers want just as much money as they got last year from the American truckers, so they're just going to be starting to focus on that more.
Great, thanks very much, Kelly.